Who gave us the wings to fly, really? Anytime we're seeing the airplanes, the helicopters, the rockets, the jets, and the first moon landing in 1969, do you ever think the initiator of the idea to its completion? Until today, we are all seeing the jets around, or we're seeing the airplanes move around us. This is a story about the Wright brothers, the two men who gave the world the ability to fly. This story is so amazing. It really shows us the capability of determination, the power of enthusiasm, the power of dream, and the capability to look at the mocking and you're like, you snub it off and just focus on your dream. It's a good story. So the first part of the story, Catchers of Jade Medium, we're going to look at the early life of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers is Orville and Wilbur. Wilbur was born in 1867. Orville was born in 1871 in Dayton, Ohio. Wilbur was actually born in Millville, Indiana. Their dad was a bishop. Their mom was just a homemaker who so loved and was talented in just making stuff at home, repairing stuff. At an age when Wilbur was actually 11 years and Orville was 7 years, Dad came home with a certain toy. It was a helicopter toy. It was a gift to these kids. It was made of bamboo, cork, and a rubber band, whereby if you pull the rubber band and twisted it, then that toy aeroplane could be in air, then fall. That was the moment they got the ignition to really chase the dream. They were like, how was it possible? They were like, but how do we also make something of a similar sort, but big enough? That was the birthplace of the dream, to making an aeroplane. So they went ahead into starting doing the research, doing the groundwork, learning more, watching the birds, looked for the books talking about flight. They studied mechanics, science. They loved all sorts of math research. Just at an age when Orville was 18 years, he actually opened a printing press. In this printing press, they actually started doing making their own machines to produce newspapers. He definitely could get the support from the brother Wilbur. They went ahead into selling newspapers, but during their moment of doing their business, they actually, at the end of it all, they created a bicycle shop, where they repaired, sold bicycles. They used them and they were actually creating from these to do what? To fund their project. And during that time, during the same period, remember, they're always building the vision to do what? To come up with an airplane. They proceeded very well. And when time went by, they actually were learning much more. And during their own learning, they were discovering also the mistakes that the other inventors were actually making. Remember, this is 1800. No one had been able to make any working aeroplane. So everything they were actually trying to really come up with was to build everything from scratch. In 1892 now, they created their Wright Cycle Company. And in this moment, they were actually doing what? They were making bicycles and repairing. And all these projects from the moment when they were head open their bicycle repair is that this is very important in this segment, because you see, there were men who were sitting back in the room with a dream, but always in shaking their dream and putting on the ground to ensure that they're having skills, hands-on skills here. That was the beautiful moment about it. So they went ahead having the Wright cycle, that is in 1892, making the cycles, repairing. And they used the money in actually their shops to do what? As a laboratory to experiment more on their project. They started working on the glider. A glider is just a machine that is able to move in air without any motor, balance itself very well, then come down. So that was their first initial project, working on a glider. I remember by then they had been able to learn on so many of the mistakes that were actually being done by the other inventors. An example of what they actually focused on was also a person by the name Otto Lilienthal, who was a person who had been able to create a glider but actually died in a crash in the same glider. So they had to pick the learnings for the same for them now to start working on a way to make a perfect glider that could be able to balance very well in air. So after them studying the mistake, they were to fine tune, and they realized something very powerful, that most of the gliders were not really working because the inventors were really not really focusing on the balancing capability. So that is where they emphasize and put energy. They had to focus on one, aerodynamics. That is the science of how objects moved in air. That is the first bit. The number two was also they had to focus on the bit of wind warping. That is on how objects could be twisted in air, balanced in air, move comfortably and land. Yeah? And also they borrowed these ideas from how the birds were able to maintain in air. You see, watching at the birds many hours, studying their movement, their landing, their up, their twisting of their wings, yeah, their flapping of the wings, the movement of the head, staying streamlined, that constant movement of birds in air. They focused their energy on that bit as well. When time went by, them working on the gliders for a long period of time, learning from the mistakes, in 1900, they had created quite a number of the gliders. So what they did was to look for a very comfortable place for them to go and run the tests. So they moved and went to Kitchhawk, North Carolina. Why did they choose that area? Because you see, the area had strong winds. That is bit number one. And why? It's because you see, these gliders definitely needed to be lifted by air. The second segment, the area had soft sand for crash landing. Remember that you see they had already discovered that you see if you make mistakes, then definitely you're going to die in your glider. There is that bit of falling. So if you're going to crash on a soft land so that you also not die or injuring yourself so badly. Number three is that the area had few people, low population. So less people to discourage, laugh at their project. They took their stuff, left their comfort shop, went ahead into Kitchhawk. They built their own workshops, cooked their own food. These were two men, Chris on their hands, and a sky full of dreams here. They worked on the project, and what they did was they could every time go to the hills with their gliders, go up, test, land. There was that bit of damages happening. They recreated again and again and again until in 1902 they had been able now to prove to the world that they could create a glider, control it very well, then land very safely. Then you see, in that bit of 1900 to 1902, they had actually created around 700 gliders. Imagine that, the devotion, the sacrifice. But you see, after discovering this again, they were like, no, we need now to power their glider. So they took the second challenge, a leap to the unknown, creating an engine. So they went ahead into researching much more on the current engines, but they were not finding a lighter engine that could really work on their project. So for them, they were like, you see, the local manufacturers, those that were being used in cars or in the steam engines, they were not very suitable. They were to build an engine from scratch. Remember, they were not in any engineering class, but now they were to go ahead into creating something. They read, and also they got some support from a guy by the name of Charlie Taylor, their friend. So at the end of it all, they managed to build a 12 horsepower gasoline engine. Yeah, that was made of aluminum, light, a very rare one during that time. Then it came a bit over creating the propeller. During that time, the propellers that were actually being used were not very suitable because those propellers were just being used to push wind backwards. Yeah, but for them, they saw a propeller as a rotating wing. So they had also to shape their propeller to something accurate. So they made an 8.5 feet propeller, two of them actually. If you estimate that length comes to around 2.5, it's more of a distance of a door, a normal door. So those are like a distance of two doors. Then there is a bit whereby it was actually 95% more efficient than even modern propellers. Yeah. After shaping that, you see, they had their final machine in 1903. So finally, they've been able to work on the engine, on the propellers. They've been able to work on the glider. So the 1903 Wright Flyer was up. So that plane it is having the 12 horsepower engine, you get. Then the wingspan was around 40 feet. If you estimate that, it should be around 12 meters. Yeah. Then you are having these materials on it. It is first of all 605 pounds. If you convert that, it could be around 260 kgs. Yeah. Then the engine itself was around 82 kgs or 180 pounds. Then on the structure bit, it's made of spruce wood, fabric and wires. Yeah. Then there is a bit where you're having the controls. The controls where you're having the rear rudder. The rear rudder was the one that was being used to make it turn left or right. Then there is a bit of the warping also as a control, just for it to roll in the rolling capability. Then you're having the bit where the pilot position was you lie flat on your stomach to avoid the friction of the air when moving. Yeah. So the bit of testing, they went back to Kate Hawk, that is 903. In December 14, Wilbur was the first one, lying flat. Then they're using the wood track and the launch rail to just move, so that it gives that momentum of movement. But now what happened was when the aeroplane actually, it took off very fast, stalled, then boom on the ground. You get no crying, no screaming, back to work, repaired the damages. Then after 3 days in 17 December, they went ahead into again retesting. This time, flipping the coin, it was the turn of Orville as a pilot, lying still on your stomach. Then it rode, it took off. Wilbur running side, watching the brother do it. It actually went at a distance of around 120 feet, estimating it is usually 36 meters. Then the time taken was 12 seconds. But now it was a celebration. It was the first time in history a powered human aeroplane could go to air and then land safely. On that day, they created three of the planes, and the third one was actually could be able to go at a distance of around 852 feet. And the time covered was around 59 seconds, but they had made it. So it was actually Daniel, a photographer, who took a certain photo, during that time, and this photo goes down in history as an inspiration. Just the brother Wilbur running beside the younger brother Orville, doing their thing and finally having their dream come true. In part 2 of this conversation, the world won't believe you until you prove it, until you win. How mockery now came in play. We could expect that, the world was going to go up in jubilation and happiness, or with a euphoric experience. But this was all rejected. You could expect the New York Times could air this, but nothing. The world was like, no, these bicycle guys could not just go ahead into real flying in front of the scientists. That cannot happen. The number 2 was that if it was true, then the government could be involved. If the government was never involved, then this is not a good deal. But they never cried. They went back. When they did more research, without giving up, what they did was they were to go back and improve their system. So they worked on new aeroplanes, and in these new aeroplanes, what they did was to improve their controlling capability, to improve their cycle turnings, to improve it in a way that it could carry passengers. And in that period of 1904 to 1905, they went ahead in testing more aeroplanes in hidden fields. They were very smart because the fact that when you're creating these, you're also having people coming in play trying to really copy your idea. So one is they were to test this and make sure that their airplanes were very efficient, so that anytime a new opportunity comes to present, then they were to be very perfect. They did tested, and in the end of 1905, they were able to come up with another airplane covering a distance of 24 miles, which is approximately 38 kilometers. It was able to make good turns, carry passengers, land safely. They had already made it, but still the world didn't believe it. You get? So in the early 1900s, we were having some people come in play, claiming that they had been able to discover the planes as well. But most of them were failures. An example that was in history is someone by the name Samuel Linkley, who had been able to discover a plane, but he was using the steam engines, so most of them were failing. Lifting shortly, then crashing. Then with time went by, also you could discover in 1906 that these men had devoted in creating it. They had already created something. Then in 1906 we are having someone who had in space, showing the world, flying and claiming to be a true inventor of an aeroplane. The guy by the name Alberto Santos Dumont. So you can imagine these are men who had already defeated gravity. They had already discovered this way back, but the world was not ready to defeat, only because the government was not being involved, But for them, they also agree that they're not going to really go in space, or they're not going to showcase their work unless they've been able to get the verification by signing contracts with the private people, with the governments, or maybe with the military personnel. Time went by, and in 1907, France military reached out. They were like, what is bicycle mechanics? With a claim of discovering the aeroplanes. So they went ahead into engaging them. And this was an opportunity for the Wright brothers to prove to the world of their capability and to prove to them that they had already conquered gravity. Yeah. So they prepared, and they agreed that Wilbur was to travel to France. Then for Orville, he was to go to US to prove to the US military. And in 1908 was the year for them to prove it. So what they did was, that was in May, Wilbur traveled to France. And you see, these aeroplane materials were being carried in boxes. Then they are going to assemble them in France. It took Wilbur 3 months, that is from May, June, July. Then in August is when he showcased. You could imagine that after Wilbur landing in France, people could get excited, shouting at them and what have you. But that never happened. What really happens, people watched and stood in doubt. They were like, these two bicycle guys, this guy is just like a farmer. How could he create an aeroplane? That form of doubt. But you see, for Wilbur, he was that silent, hardworking guy. He just went into the work, created, assembled the materials. Then in August, the plane was up. It was the time to show the world. And definitely he did it. People watched. It soared in air, landed safely, went again, landed safely, made turns, came back. People looked at it astonished. One person clapped. Then the second one clapped. Then everyone clapped. Yeah, people shouted that, oh, truly. The next day was like, oh, these guys were never bluffers. They've really been able to create an aeroplane. Yeah. So he went ahead into proving to the military, carrying more passengers, carrying more people. And on the other side in US, we are having our guy Orville also demonstrating to the US Army. He did it as well, and America was like, oh, America can finally fly, you see. So everyone was enjoying. People went in tears, those who could cry during that time. But you see, during that moment again, something bad was about to happen. Yeah. What happened was, during the demonstrations that were happening in the US, Orville carried a certain lieutenant called Thomas Selfridges. Yeah. And in the skies, something bad happened. Yeah. One of the propellers actually cracked, and they were at a distance of around 75 feet. It should be around 25 meters. The plane came down in a thud. Yeah. What happened was, Selfridge died, becoming the first guy to die in an airplane. For Orville, ribs broken, hips broken, legs broken. He was in hospital for some weeks. Yeah. So they were like, you see, they had put effort, energy for so many years working on this stuff, and now here they are again. People were like, but is it very safe for aeroplanes? Is this what we really want? But you see, it had happened. This didn't stop the proceeding of an airplane. Yeah. So in 1909, the government accepted. The French military signed the contracts. They got contracts from Germany, got contracts from Italy, got contracts from US. All these players came in play. The kings, leaders, and all that. These two men came famous across Europe and US. They started getting business deals in making aeroplanes for the military and for the kings, for the other leaders. Yeah. But now, from their success, definitely we define this as a very big success for you guys. Definitely it is. Actually, Wilbur now focused on the bit of protecting their legacy. He could always be fighting courts to defend the counterfeiters, because definitely once you're having something go to the world, there are always people at the back, always waiting to still do the same for them to also benefit. So he spent much of the time fighting the courtrooms, fighting the counterfeiters. And remember, in 1906, they had received a patent on their wind warping. A patent is more of a protection because that was the critical point of a plane. Yeah. So he traveled in there, signing contracts, engaging leaders, speaking in different forums. Yeah. Remember when they got these contracts, the work is very overwhelming. Yeah. They were to train new pilots. They became teachers. They're now businessmen, entrepreneurs. Definitely signing contracts and going into business. Then widening their business, meeting global leaders, and demonstration what have you. But at the same time, there's that bit where you have to protect your legacy. You also becoming a lawyer by default. So as much as this was their success, it was really killing the spirit of Wilbur. But he wanted to maintain their name, so he never got tired. So in the proceeding went on, and actually in 1909, they were called by the US government in a certain event in US here. They went ahead into actually being awarded medals. People celebrated them, thousands of them. They received the necessary appreciation for making humanity able to fly. You get. Then there's a bit where now, after their discovery, still in the 3 years, that is from 1909 to 1912, you are having that constant push by Wilbur in courtrooms, yeah. And you had one of the biggest competitor called Glenn Curtis. Glenn Curtis was also producing planes and claiming that this was their own idea. But you see, for Wilbur was like, this is theft, because the same capability that Glenn was using were actually being borrowed from the Wilbur innovations. So he had to fight, and actually it became one of the biggest war in aviation, the war between Glenn and the Wright brothers. You get. It proceeded on to the point when in 1912, when actually Wilbur was traveling from Boston, he got ill, unfortunately, and he was diagnosed with typhoid, and I think it was from a contamination of food or water. He became ill, and the guy who had a very sharp mind as a blade was now foggy. The guy who was as strong in lifting all the gliders could not even move on the bed. So Catherine, the sister, and Orville was so much devastated, it really broke Orville, because this is a guy they were able to work side by side for years. This is a brother, you get. And unfortunately, he passed away at an age of 45. He had spent all the time discovering, inventing this stuff, again fighting the courtrooms, bringing their name up there, but he never lived to really enjoy very well on this invention. This really broke Orville, and what happened was, in 1915, Orville sold the shares and stepped away. And even after stepping away, he experimented privately. Then also he served on the advisory board for aeroplanes. He also served on the safety bit, ensuring that the planes were a bit much more safe for humanity. For him, he lived long enough. He lived to witness the World War I, 1914 to 1918, the World War II, 1939 to 1945. And you see, he witnessed people being killed by, like an example, the dropping of the bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And he was like, maybe they could have discovered something a bit different than an aeroplane if their discovery was making humanity being eliminated, but the planes were already out there. You see, he grew long enough to the point where actually in 1939, during their 39th anniversary, we had President Roosevelt who actually declared during the birthday of Orville as a National Aviation Day, you get. Then actually in 1947, it was a death. Orville died at an age of 76. He had lived long enough to witness all these wars. He had actually grown enough to witness the rise in aviation, seeing all the changes, the improvements done on the plane. But for the other brother, Wilbur, he died too very soon. Yeah? So you notice that that is their end story. But now from that bit, you'll discover how this has transitioned the world to the point whereby there is that bit of moon landing. Yeah? Nowadays, you see, you could be in Nairobi. Few minutes you are in Kisumu. Few minutes you're in Eldoret. Few hours you're in Tanzania. There is that good movement, speed. Then also there's that connection in the world, whereby you could be in Kenya. Then hours you're in New York. You get? It has connected families. It has connected people. Emergencies get to their points very fast. The discoveries of the drones, the rockets, the studies in the universe, the studies of the planets, all have been made easier by their basic principles. So powerful. And the segments that I can't really pick learnings, what I feel is something that we can as well share with, is a bit whereby You can notice that at an early age, these boys discover their dream. Yeah, just from a toy, they look at things in a 3D. They get devoted, and definitely from a good support by their parents. They become inventors. Then two is on the beat where they never gave up during the 1900 and 1902, whereby they were working on the gliders.